Can you imagine a billionaire laughing at you, only to have your fingers prove him completely wrong? Emily Walker had never been one to speak up for herself, especially not in front of the high society that surrounded her. As the janitor at a luxurious hotel, she had long gotten used to being invisible. She spent her days cleaning and polishing the polished floors, scrubbing away the marks of the wealthy guests who came and went without a second thought. She'd never once considered that her life could be anything other than simple, even though there was something extraordinary hidden within her, something no one had ever noticed. That was, until one fateful evening. It all began at the hotel's extravagant ballroom, where a gala was in full swing. Emily was in the background, silently mopping the floors, when she overheard a group of guests gathered near the grand piano in the corner of the room. One man, dressed in an expensive suit and adorned with gold cufflinks, was laughing. "I bet you $1 million she can't even play a single note of this," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. The others laughed along, exchanging smug glances. Emily didn't know exactly who they were talking about, but the sound of their laughter stung. What did they think of her? Just a janitor. Useless, unimportant. They didn't know that Emily had spent years as a self-taught pianist, hidden away in the solitude of her small apartment, playing in the quiet hours when no one was around to judge her. Her music was the only place where she felt truly alive. As the evening wore on, the laughter and the loud chatter of the guests filled the ballroom. The billionaire, a man named James Carter, walked up to the piano with a grin on his face. "Hey, miss," he called out to the pianist who was setting up for the performance. "Let's have a little fun. I bet you can't play this piece I'm thinking of. If you can, I'll marry you," he said, his words clearly a joke. The crowd around him chuckled, clearly enjoying the mockery. Emily stood frozen, mop in hand, staring at the piano in the corner of the room. A challenge had been thrown out. "You're joking, right?" the pianist said, his voice laced with disbelief. "Come on, this piece is too difficult." James Carter merely smiled, his laughter echoing in the room. "Let's see how good she is then," he said, turning his gaze to Emily, who had never even been asked to touch the keys. "Let's see what this janitor is made of." The crowd grew still as Emily, feeling the weight of the challenge and the mocking eyes of the guests on her, slowly walked to the piano. She could feel the sneers on her back, but she refused to back down. This was her moment, and she wasn't about to let it slip away. Emily sat at the piano, placing her fingers lightly on the keys. The room held its breath, waiting for her to fail. But instead of being intimidated, she let her fingers flow across the keys, the music coming to her effortlessly, as if she had been waiting for this moment her whole life. The notes rang out, clear and beautiful, filling the ballroom with a sound that was as powerful as it was mesmerizing. The laughter faded into silence. Emily's music wove a magic that no one in the room had expected. James Carter, standing there with a smirk that slowly faded, watched in disbelief as she played. The crowd's eyes widened, and the energy in the room shifted. She wasn't just playing. She was performing with the soul of someone who had spent years perfecting her craft, someone who was truly gifted. When Emily finished, the room was completely silent. No one moved, no one dared to speak. The once laughing billionaire stood frozen, his mouth hanging open. The audience, who had once mocked her, now stared in stunned silence. Emily stood up from the piano, her eyes meeting James Carter's for the first time. Without saying a word, she walked away, leaving the billionaire to deal with the stunned guests and the overwhelming silence in the room. It was a moment that would never be forgotten, a moment where she proved that appearances could be deceiving and that true talent was never something to be underestimated. Emily Walker had never expected to find herself at the center of such attention. Her fingers, which had once merely caressed the keys in the quiet solitude of her small apartment, were now the reason for a room full of guests to fall into an eerie silence. The once boisterous laughter of James Carter and the crowd had faded, leaving only the soft echo of her piano performance hanging in the air. She hadn't anticipated that playing one song would change everything, but it had. As Emily stood up from the piano, she noticed the stunned looks on everyone's faces, the disbelief written across their expressions. For a brief moment, she thought she might run out of the room, back to the quiet corner where she had always felt safe. But something inside her made her stay. She had done it. She had proven her worth, not through words, but through her music. As she walked away, she heard James Carter's voice, though this time it was different. It was softer, uncertain. Wait, that was amazing, he said. Emily didn't stop. She didn't need his validation. But she couldn't deny the way his words made her feel, a small but powerful sense of triumph. She had faced his mockery head-on and come out on top. And now, she could feel the weight of that victory. The room remained quiet as she made her way to the door, her heart pounding with adrenaline. The crowd slowly began to stir, murmurs spreading like wildfire. "Who was that?" someone asked, their voice filled with awe. "She's a janitor?" "Impossible. I had no idea," another voice whispered, clearly shocked. Emily kept walking, her eyes focused ahead, determined to leave without looking back. She didn't need anyone to understand her. She didn't need them to know her past, her struggles, or her dreams. All they needed to know was that she had talent. That talent spoke louder than anything else. As she reached the door, she felt a tap on her shoulder. It was one of the hotel's employees, the one who had been working in the back. He had seen her before, sweeping the floors, pushing the carts. He had never looked twice at her. "Emily, right?" he asked. She turned to face him. "Yeah." "You were incredible," he said, his voice filled with genuine admiration. "I had no idea you could play like that. You really blew everyone away." Emily nodded, not knowing what to say. She had never craved praise, but hearing it now, coming from someone who had seen her only as a janitor, made her feel seen in a way she had never felt before. She smiled politely. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft. The employee smiled back, his eyes sparkling with respect. "If you ever decide to leave this job behind, I'm sure you'd go far. You've got a gift." Emily didn't respond immediately. She didn't need to. Instead, she walked out into the hallway, where she finally allowed herself to breathe. The weight that had been on her chest for so long seemed to lift just a little. She had done it. She had proven herself. As she passed by the employees' lounge, she noticed James Carter standing by the open door, talking to a group of guests. He looked up as she walked by, his eyes lingering on her for a moment before he turned away. But there was no sneer this time. No laughter. There was only quiet respect. Emily couldn't help but smile to herself. She hadn't done it for James. She hadn't done it for anyone else. She had done it for herself. As she stepped into the elevator, she felt a small, quiet victory within her. She wasn't invisible anymore. And no matter where life took her next, she would never let anyone make her feel small again. The following week, Emily's life at the hotel began to shift in ways she never imagined. The piano incident had spread like wildfire, and soon, whispers of the janitor who played like a concert pianist reached every corner of the hotel. People who had previously ignored her began to notice her, some offering polite smiles, others simply glancing at her with newfound respect. It was strange and, honestly, a little unsettling. Emily had never craved the spotlight. She preferred to stay out of the way, blending into the background. But now, it felt as if every step she took was being observed, as if her every movement was being measured against expectations she hadn't set. The most unexpected part of it all, however, was the shift in her interactions with James Carter. For days after the piano performance, she had avoided him, not out of spite, but out of the desire to keep things simple. She wasn't interested in any kind of conversation with him. But one morning, as she was sweeping the grand lobby, she saw him across the room, standing by the concierge desk. He wasn't laughing this time. His expression was serious, contemplative even. As she moved closer, she could feel his eyes on her. He seemed to hesitate for a moment before walking over to her, his shoes clicking on the marble floor. "Emily," he said, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. "I wanted to apologize for my behavior last week. I was out of line, and I didn't respect you. But I hope you know that what you did, playing that piece, it was incredible. You've got real talent." Emily paused, unsure of how to respond. She had never expected an apology from him. His words were sincere, but she had no interest in hearing them. "Thank you," she replied, keeping her tone even, not giving anything away. James seemed to take a step back, almost as if he were giving her space. "I was wondering," he continued, "if you'd ever consider playing for real audiences. You know, outside of this hotel. I could help you get started. You deserve to be seen by more people." Emily felt her heart race at the suggestion. She had dreamed of performing, but it was just a dream. She had never taken it seriously, always telling herself that she didn't belong in those circles. But hearing James, a billionaire no less, Offering to help her was tempting. Still, her instincts told her to stay grounded. "I'm happy here," she said quietly, her eyes scanning the lobby, not wanting to make eye contact. "I don't need more than this." James seemed to understand, nodding slowly. "I get it," he said. "But if you ever change your mind, just let me know. You have the potential to go far, Emily. Don't let it go to waste." Emily didn't respond. She wasn't sure if she even wanted to entertain the idea. There was something about the simplicity of her life that she cherished, something that felt more real to her than any audience could offer. As James walked away, Emily stood still for a moment, the weight of his words lingering in the air. She had no idea what the future held, but for now, she was content. Later that evening, as she was wiping down the grand piano, Emily couldn't help but think about the offer. She had never imagined a life where she could perform in front of crowds, but now that the idea had been planted in her mind, she couldn't shake it. The thought of being recognized for something other than her job at the hotel was both exhilarating and terrifying. But she wasn't ready to make any decisions yet. The next few days passed in a blur, and Emily continued with her work, focusing on the small things that kept her grounded. She played the piano when she had the chance, but only when no one was around to judge her. The whispers from the hotel staff had died down, but there was still a quiet undercurrent of curiosity whenever she walked by. As much as she hated the attention, Emily couldn't deny the sense of empowerment she felt each time someone acknowledged her. It wasn't about the fame or the recognition. It was about knowing that she had something valuable to offer, something that no one could take away from her. One afternoon, as she was dusting off the piano, she noticed a new guest in the lobby. He was tall, with dark hair and a sophisticated air about him. He didn't look like the typical guest at the hotel, someone who could afford to stay in such an expensive place. But there was something about him that caught her attention. He approached the piano, and Emily, ever cautious, continued her work, pretending not to notice him. The guest sat at the piano, running his fingers along the keys. Emily stopped what she was doing and watched. His playing was smooth, refined, and full of emotion. He wasn't just someone who could play. He was someone who understood music deeply. Without thinking, Emily moved closer, her curiosity getting the better of her. The guest glanced up and saw her standing there. He smiled. "You play, don't you?" he asked, his voice warm and inviting. Emily hesitated, then nodded. "A little," she said. He chuckled. "I can tell," he said. "Why don't you join me?" The invitation caught her off guard. She had never imagined herself playing alongside a stranger, especially someone who was clearly so skilled. But something about the way he spoke made her feel at ease. Without thinking, she sat down beside him at the piano, and for the first time in days, she played with abandon. The music flowed between them effortlessly, as if they had been playing together for years. For those few minutes, Emily didn't care about the eyes watching her or the expectations placed on her. It was just the music, the keys, and the joy of playing. As they finished, the guest turned to her with a look of admiration. "You're amazing," he said, his words sincere. "You should never hide your talent. It's too beautiful for that." Emily smiled, not knowing what to say. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she belonged. In that moment, the world seemed full of endless possibilities. As the days went on, Emily found herself wrestling with the idea of her future. The brief moment of playing the piano with the stranger had awakened something inside her, something she had pushed aside for so long. The man who played alongside her had shown her a side of herself she had almost forgotten, a side that wasn't just about cleaning or serving, but about creating, expressing, and truly living. She couldn't stop thinking about the music. It had been years since she had allowed herself to truly imagine a life where she could pursue her art. The hotel had become her world, the same routine every day, but that fleeting moment at the piano with the guest made her wonder if she was meant for something more. It was early one morning when Emily was pushing her cleaning cart down the hallway that she was stopped by a familiar voice. She turned around and saw James Carter again. He was standing in the hallway, a couple of feet away, watching her. This time, however, he wasn't making jokes or offering apologies. His expression was serious, almost contemplative. "Emily," he called, his voice carrying an air of sincerity that caught her off guard. "Can I talk to you for a moment?" Emily stopped in her tracks, unsure of what to say. After their previous conversation, she hadn't expected to hear from him again. "Sure," she said, trying to keep her tone neutral. James stepped closer, his eyes studying her. "I've been thinking about what you did," he began. "And I know this might sound strange, but I want to help you. You have real potential, and I don't think you should waste it. You're more than just a janitor here. You're an artist." Emily felt a strange mixture of emotions, surprise, discomfort, and a small spark of hope. She had always been afraid to admit her dreams to anyone, even to herself. Being a janitor had been her reality, and it had felt safer to stay in the shadows. "I appreciate what you're saying, James, but I'm not sure what I could do with that potential," Emily replied, her voice hesitant. "I've always just played for myself. I don't know if I belong in the world you're talking about." James looked at her for a long moment, his gaze intense. "I know it's a lot to consider, but if you ever change your mind, let me know. There's a lot more to you than you realize, and I can help you take the next step. You don't have to stay here forever, Emily." Emily didn't respond immediately. She didn't know what to think. The thought of leaving everything she knew behind, the hotel, her job, the quiet, predictable life she had built, was terrifying. But the idea of doing something more, of living a life that was true to who she really was a temptation she couldn't ignore. After their brief conversation, James gave her a small smile, a look of understanding in his eyes, and walked away. Emily stood there for a moment, the weight of his words settling over her. She wasn't ready to make any decisions, but she knew one thing. Something inside her had shifted. That night, as she played the piano alone in the quiet of the hotel lobby, the keys felt different beneath her fingers. It was as though the music was calling her to something greater. Emily played with more confidence than she ever had before. For the first time in years, she played not just for herself, but for the possibility of something more. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, she felt like she could step into it. As she finished her piece, Emily closed her eyes and took a deep breath. The soft echo of the piano filled the room, a reminder of the beauty she had always had inside her. She wasn't just a janitor. She was an artist, and she was ready to see where that path could take her. The next morning, Emily arrived at the hotel to find a letter waiting for her. It was from the manager, informing her of a special event that was being held at the hotel in a few days. The event was an exclusive charity gala, and they were looking for someone to perform a piece on the piano. Emily had played at the gala before, but it was always as part of the background, never as the main attraction. She stared at the letter, the words on the page seeming to jump out at her. Could this be her chance? Could she finally step into the spotlight and show the world what she was capable of? It felt like the perfect opportunity. But as much as she wanted to say yes, fear gripped her heart. The thought of performing in front of a crowd made her nervous. But deep down, she knew she had to take the risk. This was the moment she had been waiting for. She couldn't let fear hold her back anymore. Emily made up her mind. She would perform at the gala. It was time to take a leap of faith. As the night of the gala approached, Emily practiced every day, honing her skills, pushing herself further than she had ever gone before. When the night finally came, she was ready. Emily stepped onto the stage, her heart pounding in her chest. The spotlight was on her, the room filled with the buzz of anticipation. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and began to play. The music flowed through her like a river, each note perfectly in tune with her soul. For the first time in her life, Emily wasn't just playing for herself. She was playing for the world, and she was ready to show everyone who she really was. The night of the gala arrived, and Emily felt a knot in her stomach as she stepped into the grand ballroom. The chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting a warm glow over the guests, who were dressed in their finest. The air was thick with the hum of conversation, the clinking of glasses, and the faint sound of a string quartet playing softly in the background. It all felt like a world she had never quite belonged to. She wasn't used to being the center of attention, but tonight was different. Tonight, she would perform. She could feel the nervous energy building up inside her, but she pushed it down. This was her chance. As she walked toward the grand piano, Emily's heart raced. Her fingers itched to touch the keys, but she had to stay calm. She had practiced for this moment for days, perfecting each note, each phrase. This wasn't just about playing music. It was about proving to herself, and to everyone else, that she was more than just a janitor. The crowd had already gathered, their eyes fixed on the stage. They whispered among themselves, curious about the woman who had suddenly appeared out of nowhere, ready to take the spotlight. Emily took a deep breath as she reached the piano, her eyes briefly scanning the room. She saw James Carter standing near the front, watching her with a look of quiet encouragement. His presence made her feel both nervous and reassured at the same time. She had always thought of him as a symbol of the world she didn't belong to, but now, she felt as though she was stepping into that world with confidence. She sat down at the piano, her fingers brushing against the cool, ivory keys. The room fell silent as she began to play. At first, the sound was soft, almost tentative, but as the music built, Emily's nerves melted away. The familiar melody enveloped her, guiding her hands with precision and grace. Each note she played felt like a conversation between her soul and the piano, a dialogue she had never been able to express in words. The music filled the room, and for the first time in a long while, Emily felt truly alive. She could feel the energy of the room shift. The guests, who had been talking among themselves just moments ago, were now completely still, captivated by her performance. Emily's fingers danced across the keys, effortlessly moving through the complex passagework, the rich chords ringing out in perfect harmony. She had never played with such intensity, such passion. This was more than just a performance. It was a declaration. She wasn't just a janitor. She was an artist, and she had every right to be here. As the final chords rang out, the room held its breath, the music lingering in the air. Emily sat still for a moment, her hands resting lightly on the keys. The silence that followed was thick with anticipation, and for a second, she wondered if they had even noticed. But then, the applause came, loud and immediate, a wave of sound that washed over her. She looked up to see the guests on their feet, clapping and cheering. James Carter was among them, his hands clapping with genuine enthusiasm. Emily felt a warmth spread through her chest, a mixture of relief and pride. She had done it. She had shown them who she was. She had shown them what she was capable of. As the applause continued, Emily stood up, giving a modest nod to the audience. She could feel their eyes on her, but for the first time, she didn't mind. She had earned this moment. She had earned their respect. After the performance, Emily made her way off the stage, her mind still spinning with the rush of the experience. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time, she felt like she was standing on the edge of something new, something exciting. The world she had once thought was out of reach now seemed within her grasp. James Carter approached her as she stepped down from the stage. His smile was warm, and his eyes sparkled with admiration. "Emily, that was incredible," he said, his voice full of sincerity. "I knew you had talent, but that was something else. You're meant for more than just cleaning floors." Emily felt a small blush creep up her neck at his words, but she smiled back. "Thank you, James," she said softly. "I never thought I'd be doing something like this." "You were amazing," he said again. "You belong here, just as much as anyone else." Emily didn't know what to say to that. She wasn't sure she belonged in this world, but maybe, just maybe, she could carve out a place for herself. The night ended, and as Emily left the ballroom, she couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. She had faced her fears, stepped out of her comfort zone, and proved that she was more than her job, more than her circumstances. She had shown herself, and the world, that she was an artist, and no one could take that away from her. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, Emily felt like she had the power to shape it. She didn't know where her journey would lead, but she was ready to find out. And that was enough for now. Weeks passed after the gala, and Emily found herself in a new rhythm. The hotel had changed for her in ways she hadn't expected. She wasn't just the janitor anymore, at least, not in the way she had been before. People noticed her now. It was as if she had transformed in their eyes from someone who simply cleaned up their messes to someone who had a voice, someone who had something to offer. But Emily wasn't sure how to handle this new attention. She was grateful, but she also felt a little lost in the change. She had spent so many years hiding in plain sight, doing her job with quiet efficiency, never asking for more, never expecting more. Now, the world seemed to be offering her something new, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for it. One afternoon, as Emily was dusting off the lobby piano, she felt a tap on her shoulder. She turned around to see the same man who had performed with her that night, the guest who had shown her how to play with abandon. He smiled warmly at her, his eyes twinkling. "You're still here, I see," he said. "I thought I'd find you playing." Emily smiled shyly. I don't play as often as I'd like to, she replied, feeling a little embarrassed. But I do when I can. The man's expression softened. I wanted to talk to you about something, he said. I know this might sound forward, but I have a proposition for you. I'm a music producer, and I've been working on a project for a while now. I need someone with your talent, someone who isn't afraid to show the world what they can do. Emily blinked, unsure if she had heard him correctly. I don't know if I'm the right person for something like that, she said quietly. I'm just a janitor. The man shook his head. You're more than that, Emily. I've seen it. I've heard it. You have something special, and it would be a shame for the world not to hear it. Emily felt a mix of emotions swirling inside her. Fear, doubt, and a tiny flicker of excitement. She had dreamed of a life where her music mattered, where she could share it with others. But this was more than a dream. It was an opportunity. But was she ready for it? I've been thinking about what you said at the gala, the man continued. I know you're not sure what you want yet, but I'd love for you to consider coming on board. You don't have to decide right away. Take your time. But if you want to take that next step, I'm here for you. Emily didn't know what to say. She hadn't expected this kind of offer, not from someone like him. He was a producer, a person who worked with the best. Why would he want someone like her? But at the same time, the idea of working with him, of turning her passion into something real, was irresistible. I'll think about it, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know if I'm ready. The man smiled, as if he had expected that answer. No pressure, he said gently. Take all the time you need. I'll be here. As he walked away, Emily stood frozen in place, the weight of his words pressing down on her. She had always been content with the quiet life she had, with the simple pleasures of playing music when no one was around to judge her. But now, she was faced with a choice: stay where it was safe, or take a chance and see where her talent could take her. It wasn't a decision she could make easily. As the days passed, Emily continued to play the piano in the hotel lobby, but the music felt different now. Each note she played carried the weight of possibility. She knew that she couldn't stay in her quiet corner forever, but she wasn't sure if she had the courage to step into the unknown. She had spent so long hiding from the world that the idea of stepping into it was both thrilling and terrifying. Her mind kept returning to the same question. What if she wasn't good enough? What if she failed? But deep down, she knew she couldn't let fear decide her future. If she wanted to be true to herself, she had to take a leap of faith. And so, after days of hesitation, Emily finally made a decision. She would take the chance. She would pursue her music, no matter the outcome. She wasn't sure where it would lead her, but for the first time, she felt ready to find out. The next day, she called the man, her heart pounding in her chest. I'm ready, she said, her voice steady. I'll do it. The man on the other end of the line sounded delighted. That's great, Emily. I knew you had it in you. As she hung up the phone, Emily felt a sense of relief wash over her. It wasn't the end of her journey. It was just the beginning. The following week, Emily was thrown into a whirlwind of new experiences. The phone call she had made was just the beginning. The music producer had wasted no time, setting up meetings and discussing ideas for her music career. It was all happening so quickly, and Emily could barely keep up with the changes. For years, she had kept her talent hidden, playing only in the quiet corners of the hotel or in the solitude of her small apartment. But now, the world was asking her to step into the spotlight, and she was unsure if she was ready for such a drastic change. Still, the excitement in her chest was undeniable. She had always loved music, but she had never imagined this would be her reality. She had dreamed of sharing her music with others, but the path to making that dream come true seemed so far out of reach. Yet, here she was, surrounded by people who saw her potential, who believed in her, and who were ready to help her reach it. Emily knew this was her chance, but there were moments when doubt crept in. Could she handle the pressure? What if she wasn't good enough? Those thoughts lingered in the back of her mind, but she pushed them aside. She couldn't afford to let fear control her anymore. The producer had set up her first recording session, and Emily was both terrified and thrilled. It wasn't just the technical side of it, but the fact that she would be creating something that would be heard by others. She would be sharing a part of herself that she had kept hidden for so long. On the day of the session, Emily arrived at the studio with a mix of excitement and nerves. The building was sleek, modern, and intimidating. The giant glass windows reflected the city's skyline, and the soundproof doors seemed like a barrier between the world she knew and the one she was about to step into. She was greeted by the producer, who was friendly and upbeat. "Emily, it's great to finally meet you in person. We're going to make some magic today," he said with a smile that made her feel a little more at ease. He led her into the studio, where the equipment looked like it belonged to another world. Microphones, computers, soundboards, all of it was overwhelming, but also exciting. Emily took a deep breath and walked to the center of the room, where the grand piano awaited her. It was the same feeling she had gotten when she first sat down at a piano in the hotel lobby. A mix of anticipation and fear, but with something more. This time, she wasn't just playing to pass the time or to calm her nerves. She was creating something real, something that would last. "You ready?" the producer asked. Emily nodded, her fingers lightly brushing the keys. The first few notes were tentative, as if testing the waters. But soon, the music began to flow, just like it had when she played in the hotel lobby, when she played for herself. The difference now was that she was playing for an audience that was waiting to hear what she had to offer. As the song progressed, she felt more comfortable, more at ease with the music. The producer stood behind the soundboard, nodding along with the rhythm, clearly impressed with what he was hearing. Emily could feel his approval, and it made her play with more confidence. The session lasted for hours, and by the end, Emily was exhausted but exhilarated. She had never imagined that making music could feel so powerful. When she finished the last note, she looked up to see the producer with a wide grin on his face. "That was incredible," he said. "You have something special, Emily. This is just the beginning." His words made her smile, but they also filled her with uncertainty. She wasn't sure where this journey would take her, but for the first time, she wasn't afraid to find out. The next few days were a blur of meetings and rehearsals. Emily was introduced to other musicians, to people who could help her record and promote her music. Every part of her was overwhelmed, but it was the good kind of overwhelm, the kind that came with the promise of something new, something exciting. Slowly, Emily started to believe that maybe, just maybe, she had a place in this world. She wasn't just the janitor anymore. She wasn't just the quiet woman who played piano in the background. She was an artist. She was making her dreams come true. And although the road ahead wasn't clear, Emily knew she was ready to walk it. There would be challenges, there would be moments of doubt, but for the first time, she wasn't looking back. She was looking forward, ready to embrace whatever came next. As the weeks passed, Emily's life began to change in ways she had never imagined. Her music career, which had once seemed like a far-off dream, was now her reality. The recording sessions had become more frequent, and every time she sat down at the piano, she felt more and more connected to her art. The sound, the rhythm, the emotion, it all came so naturally to her now. She was no longer the janitor who played piano in the background. She was an artist, a musician, a woman who had finally found her voice. But with this new life came new challenges. Emily was no longer hidden away in the shadows. She was stepping into the spotlight, and with that came the pressure of expectations. The producer, who had become her mentor, was constantly pushing her to go further, to reach higher. She was introduced to agents, managers, and promoters, all eager to work with her. She was thrust into meetings, photo shoots, and rehearsals. It was a lot to handle, and at times, it felt overwhelming. But Emily was determined to make it work. She had worked too hard to let this opportunity slip away. One evening, after a long day of rehearsals, Emily sat alone in her apartment, staring at the piano. The quiet of the room was comforting, but her mind was racing. The pressure to succeed, to live up to everyone's expectations, was starting to wear on her. She had always been a private person, content to play her music for herself. But now, she had to share it with the world. She had to prove that she was worthy of the attention, of the spotlight. It felt like a burden at times, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for it. Just as she was about to close her eyes and rest, there was a knock at her door. She opened it to find James Carter standing on the other side, his usual confident demeanor softened by the concern in his eyes. "Hey, Emily," he said, stepping inside when she motioned for him to. "I wanted to check in on you. How are you holding up?" Emily smiled weakly, trying to hide the exhaustion she was feeling. "I'm fine," she said, though she didn't quite believe it herself. James could see through her facade. He had seen the changes in her, the way she had started to retreat into herself, the weight of her new life settling heavily on her shoulders. "You don't look fine," he said gently. "I know it's a lot, but you've got to take care of yourself too. The music will come, but if you burn out, it won't be worth it." Emily sat down on the couch, running a hand through her hair. "I don't know," she admitted. "I've always wanted this, but now that it's here, it feels so overwhelming. I don't know if I can keep up with all of this." James sat next to her, offering a comforting smile. "You don't have to do it alone. You've got people who believe in you, people who want to help you succeed. But it starts with you taking care of yourself first." Emily looked at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. It was easy to forget, in the hustle and bustle of her new life, that she didn't have to carry all the weight by herself. There were people who cared about her, who wanted to see her succeed, not just as a musician, but as a person. "Thank you, James," she said softly. "I needed to hear that." James smiled again, standing up to leave. "Anytime," he said. "Just remember, this is your journey. Take it at your own pace. You don't have to rush." As he left, Emily sat in the quiet of her apartment, feeling a little lighter. Maybe she didn't have to do everything perfectly. Maybe it was okay to take things slow, to find her own rhythm. The next morning, she woke up with a renewed sense of clarity. She was still the same woman who had dreamed of being heard. But now, she was learning how to balance that dream with the reality of her new life. She was ready to embrace the challenges, but she also knew she needed to take care of herself along the way. It wasn't just about music. It was about finding peace in the process. Emily knew it wouldn't be easy. There would be days when the pressure felt too much, when doubt crept in. But for the first time in a long while, she felt ready to face it all. She wasn't just playing for herself anymore. She was playing for everyone who had believed in her, for the people who had seen something in her when she couldn't see it in herself. And that, more than anything, gave her the strength to keep going. Emily's music career had taken off in ways she never imagined. The offers kept coming, the opportunities were endless, and yet, a part of her still clung to the quiet, humble life she had once known. It wasn't that she didn't love the attention. There were moments when the spotlight felt intoxicating, when the sound of applause felt like a warm embrace. But there was also the weight of expectation, the pressure to keep delivering, to be everything everyone believed she could be. It was overwhelming at times. She often found herself retreating into solitude, finding comfort in the moments when she was alone with her piano. But it wasn't just about playing anymore. It was about creating something real, something that spoke to the heart of who she was. As the months went by, Emily's music began to evolve. She wasn't just playing songs, she was telling stories. She was expressing herself in ways she had never known how to before. She had always kept her emotions tucked away, hidden behind the keys of the piano, but now, she was learning to share them with the world. Her next big opportunity came in the form of a concert at one of the city's most prestigious venues. It was a dream come true, and yet, she felt the familiar knot of anxiety tighten in her chest. She had been preparing for this for weeks, rehearsing day in and day out. But the night before the concert, Emily felt the weight of it all settle on her shoulders. She sat at her piano, her fingers lightly touching the keys, but no sound came. She stared at the black and white keys, unsure of what to play. It felt like everything was on the line. The audience, the critics, the expectations, they were all hanging over her head. She had to get it right. As she sat there in the silence of her apartment, she thought about everything she had gone through to get here, the hotel lobby, the recording sessions, the doubts she had fought through. She thought about the people who had believed in her, who had given her the chance to show the world what she was capable of. They hadn't seen her as just a janitor. They had seen the artist within her. And now, it was time to show everyone else. She took a deep breath, pushing the doubt aside, and her fingers found the keys. The music came to her, flowing freely, just like it always had. She wasn't playing for the critics or for the audience. She was playing for herself, for the joy of creating something beautiful. The next evening, Emily stood backstage, waiting for her turn. The sound of the crowd's chatter filled the air, and she could feel the excitement building. But there was also a calmness within her now, a sense of peace she hadn't felt before. She had found her place in the world, and no matter what happened tonight, she was going to be okay. As the curtain rose, Emily stepped onto the stage. The lights were bright, and the audience was silent, waiting for her to begin. She sat at the piano, her heart racing, but her hands steady. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and let the music flow. The first notes were soft, tentative, but soon the music swelled, filling the room with a sound that was all her own. She poured everything into the performance, the emotions, the struggles, the victories. Each note was a piece of her story, each chord a reflection of who she had become. The audience was mesmerized, caught up in the beauty of the music. Emily didn't know how long she played for, but when the final note echoed through the hall, she felt a sense of completion, of fulfillment. She had done it. She had stepped into the world she had always dreamed of, and she had done it on her own terms. The applause that followed was deafening, but Emily didn't hear it. She was lost in the music, in the moment, in the feeling of having finally found her place. As she stood up, her heart still pounding, she took a bow, and for the first time in her life, she felt truly seen. The world had finally recognized her for who she was. Not just the janitor, not just the quiet girl in the background, but the artist, the musician, the woman who had found her voice. The future was uncertain, but Emily knew one thing for sure. She was ready to face it. She had come so far, and there was nothing that could stop her now.